GitHub. Let's make this public so that we can all start sharing. We can all start looking at it. We can hopefully attract some DLT experts. And that's where he dropped the IOTA Ledger Hornet code.
Okay.
And then, Mr. Storm looked at it, Bill Poster looked at it, and then it became, hey, I feel seems like something's missing here, and this isn't really matching up with the original vision. So I think the next step is I'll message him and say, look, we really need you in one of these meetings. Do we need to adjust the time for that to figure out truly where we're at and where we need to get to? But we also need to make sure we're following the vision of a decentralized network. I'll be honest, like when some people asked me to join this and kind of help out, and I like the idea of a community built decentralized network, but I'm certainly not going to support a centralized coordinator. But I think his whole intention was to follow that vision. I'm just now that I see this plugin, to me it would make sense that he sort of launched this private Tangle to get his social media DApp going, and there really was no need to do this plugin because there was no other validator to include in this committee. So like, why would you spend the time and the resources until that need is there, right? And I have a feeling that maybe he just didn't articulate that verbally in the chats. But I think we have a few data points to verify, and then we can move on and move forward and articulate. So
it's kind of weird though that he didn't know about the community of validators, so and that he didn't enable it.
It's again, there's no point. I think at this moment there's no point to make assumptions until we get direct discussion with him.
Okay.
So it's not going to do any good to make assumptions. So let me put here at the top of the list. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm not sure that many will agree with this, but I'm through the whole story with IOTA rebased. Many people were asking Dom about Simmer, and he actually pointed, and I think someone has the screenshots from what he said, that if a community appears to take Simmer forward, he would be open about discussing with it and probably helping on a side note. However, I also think that it's kind of risky of thinking something like that.
Highly risky.
Yeah, because just thinking about it, I would think to disappear the code or something like that. But from the other hand, he suggested it. I mean, I don't know. I think it's a risk.
My experience with Dom and the IF, and it's not just like once, it's not like twice, it's 7 to 10 times. They say what they think the community wants to hear at that time and has a ulterior motive behind that, and then ends up sabotaging them. And whenever sentiment sways away, they say, oh no, we're going to do this. And it's just something so simple as, if anyone remembers when they first announced Shimmer years ago, it was to be a community run. It was literally, the IF was going to hand the code over to the community, and then the community was going to vote with airdrop tokens on governance. And part of that was going to include inflation. And that inflation was going to be distributed as a distributed POS system. Not POS. I'm having a brain fart here, but that's how it was going to be protected by the network, was a delegated proof of stake. And I think what happens is the IF sees, oh shit, we can't control it, and then they take that back. But they run that narrative to get everyone involved, buy the tokens. The token has value, so then they can run the operations, and then at a point they then take all that control back, and it ends up screwing the community. I personally would not want to be involved in this at all. If any code was centrally controlled in a repository by any NGO, nonprofit, or any type of entity such as the IF or anyone else. I just, it was very frustrating building something for the community by the community to have it pulled away. And I think I'm truly an ideologist about crypto in the sense that it's decentrally run and governed by the entire community, not a small percentage. And we have the ability to build GitHub repositories where no one can just make the code go away or change the code, you know? And yeah, I would not be personally a fan of that. But if that's what the community would want to do, hey, I'm always supporting community consensus. I just probably would not spend my time to stay involved. That's just my thought on that.
Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable, actually.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got here, we'll reach out to Garrett and ask him to join the meeting next week. I think unless anyone opposes that, hey, whatever time works for Garrett, we'll just make that meeting happen.
Yeah, to at least know what's going on from his technical side, so we can have an idea of what we should look for.
Right. And then
Yeah.
the following week we'll go back to this regular time. But just to get some forward movement. And then I'll also ask him, is the current private table having a distributed committee or validators, or at least can it? Okay.
Could you also share the link for the GitHub, so he will be prepared to know if he can do it or not?
Yeah.
And if he didn't know about it, just say, here it is.
Right.
How do we make it work?
Right.
That's all.
Right. I'll just message him right now so there's no delay. Okay. So I sent in the link, asked him to join the meeting, and let's see where that goes.
All right. Also, sorry, side note. Not sure if you guys have noticed, but if the API.technology is his private Tangle, it doesn't work. The visualizer doesn't work. That's all.
No, we know that. I wouldn't even stay involved with a private centralized Tangle. I always thought that was why?
I remember seeing the milestones.
And you can already do centralized networks with the current technology. Why would you even do I just never understood the concept of private Tangle. I understand maybe a committee base, if you had Fujitsu and IBM.
Actually, many companies use private Tangles.
Sorry, what's that?
Many companies use private Tangles, and ever since the IOTA kept upgrading, they actually kept the private Tangle because it was actually functional. It's like
I know
as a whole, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a Matt Yarger that was working with Dell and the Alvarium project. He essentially runs a private Tangle and didn't do the upgrades because he needs data integrity, and the upgrades essentially took that away with streams. And then the same thing with I think it's a Danish one that they were giving out basically coupons. They all run it on a private Tangle. Same thing. They need to obscure the data and keep the data through streams so as not to reveal anyone's identity or know anyone's identities, and all run on a private Tangle. So, okay. So I think there is some other stuff we can do in the meantime and go over, but I don't think we need to get too deep until we get more information from that. Let me just share my screen real quick. But it's good. I think that discussion reveals one step closer. And I wouldn't have figured out those questions without all you guys looking at that code and seeing that. So that's awesome that, we're working as a team. So I got that here that actually should go to next actions. That's the old one. Let's go over the vote real quick. So last week we were trying to break down the airdrop. In the meeting, we kind of agreed at a 70-30, bringing it to the community. The community is fairly heavily weighted on 60-40. At the end of the day, if it was like, 25-24 and then middle votes, I would say maybe run it. But also, I mean, it's pretty much the majority on 60-40. So, you know, my vote is we just go with 60-40 and move forward. But opening it up to discussion.
Yeah, it wasn't really the results that we wanted, but again, because the margin is so big, a runoff probably doesn't make sense. We did get more participation in this than any other votes that we've had. So I'm okay doing the 60-40 just because of the nature of the spread right now.
And when we did do the runoff, I'm just looking at the other vote, which was, do we airdrop instantly, 6 months or 12 months? The instant was 18 votes, and the 12 months was 17. So I mean that was nearly split in half. And then we had 3 votes in the middle, and we reran that. So that I think justified a runoff. And again, if this was like 24 and 25 with some votes in the middle, I could see a runoff, but yeah. So anyways, just wanted to point out that last vote of why we did that runoff. I remember when we were discussing governance in one of our governance meetings, I forget who it was, but they suggested rather than doing a 51% to have like a 70% majority. And just for that, if you don't reach it, then you need to adjust the answers to where you get a 70% majority so that when you're making these, especially on these big decisions, it's not just a simple consensus or a slight consensus. It's actually a legit majority. And I always thought that was a real interesting idea because if the community or a group proposes something, you don't want just 50 plus 1%. You want the majority, like a real majority to support and go forward. So I'm just going to look at Mr. Storm said, one could argue for just calculating the arithmetic average of the voting results somewhere in the middle, since it is a continuous spectrum. I'm not that smart to understand that. If someone could,
I'd like to chime in. I think, with deepest respect for Deep Sea and Sophia, you're thinking like Americans. What I mean by that is, you guys have this first past the post idea that doesn't really work anywhere else. And you're not, and so somebody with 47% of the vote can be elected, or somebody with even less than 47% of the vote. And more people wanted someone else than the guy who got 47, and yet the person who got more than anyone else but still less than half wins, and then you move on with your lives. But nobody likes that result. In America, everybody gets upset that whoever won on that basis with a minority of votes, they're not deemed legitimate because more than half of the people didn't want that person. There's a reason that preference voting, well, in Australia it's called preference voting. I think you're starting to do it in a couple of places in America called ranked choice voting and runoff voting, which is done sometimes. There's a reason those things are considered to be more democratic. In this particular case, 31 is more than 24. 31 people wanted 60-40, and 35 people wanted something else. And so it is not reasonable, to my mind, to my Australian democratic mind, raised on preference voting, it's not reasonable to say, therefore we go for the 31 for 60-40. I don't think that's a reasonable result. Those 11 people in the middle, again, the reason I recommended a runoff vote for the last time wasn't because they were close. It was because there's no plan majority. That was my reason for recommending runoff vote last time. It wasn't because they were close. If it was a 10, 5, 6, it still justified a runoff, right? Because more than half the people didn't want most vote. And I think on that basis, I also recommend dropping off